Hello and welcome to MindGourmet. My name is Nina Kaiser. I'm the co-founder of MindGourmet and as always, your host today. My today's guest has been fascinating me with what she does from the first moment on I met her. And I can tell you, whenever I see her, wherever I see her, she's just giving me the best hugs. Melissa Waterman. And just in case you don't know her yet, here is some essential information about her. Melissa is an experienced practitioner focusing on spiritual unfoldment. Her expertise and wisdom has developed through nearly 20 years as a psychotherapist and through her engagement as a Reiki master and teacher. Her current focus is on energy work, spiritual counseling, and exploration of the human energy field via the gas discharge visualization camera, or short GDV camera. Melissa is one of the 2 people in the USA who have been certified through GDV Source and KTI in Russia. She is also a certified One Light Healing Touch practitioner and uses a variety of energetic and vibrational techniques, including access bars and the emotional freedom techniques, short EFT or also called tapping, as she mentors people in their capacity to deepen their spiritual connection. Melissa works with a gas discharge visualization camera, also called Kirlian camera, to help see the areas of personhood that are strong and functioning well, and areas that may need attention. GDV analysis or electrophotonic imaging measures the strength of the organ systems, as well as levels of stress in the body via digital photography. This highly sensitive Kirlian camera provides information about the physical, emotional, and spiritual state. With this information, the participant has the ability to influence their health directly and effectively. As a part of a scientific team, Melissa has traveled to several continents utilizing the GDV camera to document the effects of meditation on the human biofield. She is also proficient with the use of the Sputnik antenna, which works in conjunction with the GDV camera to capture the energy field in an event space. This research has demonstrated the validity of the positive and beneficial effects of meditation. Hi, Melissa. Welcome.
Hello. Nice to see you. So glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to talk with you.
Thank you so much for being here with me. And did I mention everything important in my introduction? Is there anything you would like to add?
No, it's beautiful. Thank you. It's always nice to hear it. It's very an interesting experience.
Okay, then let's get started.
Yes.
So I got to know you at a Dr. Joe Dispenza's advanced workshop where you were part of his scientific team that worked with the goal to create kind of a scientific roadmap for change and transformation. And this was so fascinating for me. Can you explain to us what these measurements were about and what your part in it was?
Well, by all means. I mean, the scientific team was fairly vast over the 5 years that I worked with Dr. Joe Dispenza. My part is, as you already described, it's working with this GDV camera. The GDV camera is a Kirlian camera, so it is imaging energy. And it's a very fascinating little device. It can take pictures of the human biofield as well as energy in the room, just as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So what I was doing, I was actually taking measurements of both of those things for Dr. Joe in his research. And I think the thing that people were most knowing about was the energy in the room, and using this antenna called the Sputnik, which I'll show you images of in a minute. Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically the camera takes a picture every 30 seconds of the air, the it measures the barometric pressure, it measures the static and the noise, the electromagnetics in the room, as well as all the people in the room. And, and after evaluating all of the captures, I think, upwards of 1,600 captures in a day would be taken. And then I could sort of cut that data into bits, like different meditations or morning to afternoon or whole day versus, so we could compare each day's event and, and review the results. And what we ended up with was some pretty phenomenal findings, some unusual findings. I think one of the most unusual things that we discovered was that when people, we would measure, let's see how I would describe this. We would measure the energy of the room with anywhere from 200 to 1,500 people in it. Mm-hmm. And I would say 95% of the time, when people left the room and they meditated on a walking meditation, they might be as far as a mile away. The energy in the room would remain very high. And so I could see the energy decrease when everyone left the room for lunch or when we did a baseline, but it didn't decrease when people were meditating outside of the room. And so that was particularly puzzling to me and astounding, like, wow, this is this is a big deal. This is something like to talk about. And, and Dr. Joe Dispenza speaks about it eloquently and really has a very good grasp on the idea that we are bilocal and that when we leave a room, our energy is still affected by whatever we're doing. And so that leads to lots of discussions about whatever we're doing, like wherever you go, there you are, wherever you've been, there you are. So it's a very interesting idea. But it happened, it was a repeatable experiment that we did over and over and over. He just did some energy of the room in Santa Fe, and it happened there as well. Mm-hmm. So it happens at almost all of his events. So I think only one or two did that not occur when people were outside of the room. So did that answer your question?
It did. And I had actually two thoughts when you spoke. One was that one thing I like so much in particular is that we are starting now, or actually have started for quite some time, to be able to measure these things that people were always wondering about, but never knew. It's really like demystifying some things that now are scientific reality and before have been more in the realm of mysticism, which I think is very beautiful and it's very important. And the other thing was that this weird feeling that sometimes when you move into a new home might also be connected to the fact that there were people living there before you.
Yes. I think there have been many tests on furniture, that furniture holds energy, that it's a good idea to try and clear energy from, like, when your great aunt gives you, she passes and it's been in her home for 50 or 60 years. And if you like your great aunt, it might work out. But if your great aunt was a bit of a curmudgeon, you might want to clear that energy, right? Not bring that into your house, right? So if furniture can hold energy, then spaces absolutely hold energy. And that's one of the other things that I do as I clear energy from spaces if people request it for me. Yeah. So I can always do the test first to show them what the energy is like. If there's high static, the quality of information I get isn't so much, the energy is bad or the energy is good. I can say the energy is low or the energy is high. The energy is high but very coherent, which means it's really good. I put I'm the one who says it's good, right? That high and coherent means there's something real going on. But if the energy is quite low and full of static, then it'd be good to get the windows open and do some little rituals to help it transfer, to help it transmute into something a little higher. And then I've done lots of tests with the GDV camera to see what the change is, both in my own home, my daughter's home. I've been hired to do that for many people. And there's always a substantial difference in the quality of the energy after a clearing has occurred. So it's a pretty neat thing that we have a device that shows it, right? That really proves that something actual has happened. People waving feathers around and ringing bells,
Yes.
that's always been kind of hooey. And now, well, the hooey is actually having some effect, so that's a beautiful thing. The other thing I think is really interesting to mention, it might fit here, is that I was speaking with someone yesterday and they said to me, well, I really trust traditional Western medicine. And I said, well, that's really interesting. I don't so much, but I get that idea. And I was speaking about the camera and they were thinking it was very, hooey, for lack of a better word, a more mystical kind of a thing was being measured rather than standard medicine. And I thought, but isn't it interesting that in all of Europe and all of Russia, that this camera is considered a standard medical device, that it is standard medicine for them to use for very basic understandings of the human body. Very basic tests are done before, say, you would go for surgery. You'd have a GDV reading, and it's standard medicine, but it's just not standard here. And so somehow it's devalued here in the US because it's about energy, but it's not, it really is standard medicine. So just an interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's observable often. I think that new real scientific findings and inventions take years and years and years to make their way into like everyday medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but
Absolutely.
I think it would be really now a good place to tell us more about this Kirlian camera, what it is, what it does, and maybe to show how they look like the GDV camera and also Sputnik, and so that people really can see how you work and what you do with this.
I would be happy to show you. So these images are fairly familiar to most people. They've come across them at least in a Google search, or someone's seen this image in science class or somewhere. And these are basically Kirlian photographs. Basically, a group of Kirlians discovered that if they took photographs, which was in the 1880s, a very new technology in general, photographing anything, if they added a tiny microvolt of electricity, that they got this sparkling effect around the edges of things. And so they did most of their tests on plants rather than humans. And, they realized that they were seeing life force energy. And the reason they figured that out is because they would take pictures of leaves that had been dead a long time and versus leaves that were fresh off of a plant. And of course, there was more sparkle around the edges of plants that were alive. And so here's some other images. This first picture, I think you can tell it's a sunflower.
Yes, so beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's really quite alive, isn't it? And then the things I like best about these other two images is that they're rocks, right? So one is an ammonite fossil of it's a little spiral creature, ancient creature, and that rock is what we would consider absolutely not alive, as far as life force energy goes. And quartz, we know quartz conducts energy for sure because we put it in radios, but here it is just having its own energy, and we get a nice picture of it. So, the Kirlian camera is quite amazing that it can capture what's going on when we normally wouldn't be able to see that.
Yeah.
So this is what my GDV camera looks like. This is a GDV Pro camera. It's a little different than some of the other models that are out there. And this is the 10 microseconds with a charge of 10 millivolts is put to the bottom of a glass plate when you either put an object on that plate or your finger, a test object if we're doing energy in the room. At the same moment that 10 millivolts are at the bottom of the glass, that's when a digital photograph is taken, and the image we get, sorry about that, we get images something like this.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had one image of fingertips, but this is a compilation of the fingertips. This happens to be a pre and a post-test image. So you can see that there are spaces and holes and in this biofield. It's not the aura, it's a biofield. Some of the literature, if you look up GDV online, will talk about it as though it's the aura of a person, but it's really their biofield. It's a different energetic system than the auric field. But you can see that after meditating, that things filled in all the way around very nicely,
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
very solidly. So this is just one lovely example. Another thing that the camera shows is what's going on with chakras, and it's a very scientific test. It's the images, of course, a standard looking image of what we think of as the chakras or the energy centers, but what's being tested are all of the endocrine systems and organs that are correlated to each of these energy, what we consider the chakras. And so you may have heard of Candace Pert. She was a biophysicist who originally, back in the 70s, I believe she was part of a team of people who discovered the opioid receptor site in the brain. And she, I'm not sure if she actually received the Nobel Peace Prize. I think that she didn't, and that was part of why she left. She was working on the team, but the team didn't recognize her because she was a woman.
Oh,
so she started really investigating things like chakras. And so I think it was in the early 2000s that she discovered the nerve bundles that correlate completely with both Indian and Chinese medicine that sort of make up what we now commonly call the chakras, or at least these 7 major chakras. There are many more chakras than these 7. So the camera is taking images of the fingers, but that data is being correlated and filtered and then, put into these categories so we can see very clearly what's going on with chakras. In these images, you can see that some of the chakras on the pre-test are kind of off to the left or off to the right. And of course, in reality, the chakras are never off to the left or off to the right, right? They're, in reality, they're always in the center of our body, but they may become quite small or become much larger, have more energy in them. So this particular program shows when something is skewed as you're looking at it, the way you're looking at it now. If it's skewed off to the left, it's showing that the focus of that energy is being spent out in the world. And if it were, none of these are showing it, but if any of them were skewed off to the right, maybe the crown is just slightly on the pretest is slightly off to the right. Mm-hmm. It shows that there's a more internal focus of the energy. So it's where the energy is being used. So it's really very interesting, right? When people meditate, this again is a pre and a post test from a Dr. Joe Dispenza event. After several days of meditating quite intently, this person's chakras have all come into balance between their inner world and their outer world. So it's a beautiful thing.
This is so impressive, really.
And it really is. Yeah. And so this is the Sputnik. This is the antenna that captures. It doesn't actually capture. Let's see. What's the word I want to use? It's doing what antennas do. It's just standing there. And it looks quite large, doesn't it? But it's not. It's maybe 4 or 5 inches tall. But those needles are really quite sharp. They're very pointy. It's always very interesting to travel on an airplane with it. Yeah, it catches me in the baggage often.
Mm-hmm.
But it just sits, and it's plugged into the GDV camera, and it's also attached to a test object, a titanium test object. And so the energy that is being captured is coming through the antenna, and then the picture is being taken by the camera. And then that data is evaluated to show what's happening in a room, whether energy is going up or down, or whether it's coherent, or is it just completely staticky and has tons of entropy. So it's a very interesting thing. I think that, so this is the image of the energy in the room. It's just one. This is Italy from 2017, I see, during a pineal gland meditation. And it's just one capture. I believe I said before, I take an image every 30 seconds.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so this is just what one of them looks like. And of course, people will come up to me and say, well, how is it going? And I look at this and I think it's going well. Like, this is a beautiful little ring of energy, but I can evaluate a human fingertip, but I don't know how to evaluate a test object image. It's just like, what does this little, if you can see my cursor, what does this little divot mean versus this little outburst? I don't know. I can just see the energy, and I rely predominantly on the computer to tell me what that energy is doing. Whereas with the human energy field, I can look at finger images and really see what's going on with a person, where they're very healthy and where they're needing some support. I think that's my last slide. Oh yeah, that's my last slide.
Thank you. This was so interesting. And so speaking and thinking of change that people so much often desire in their lives, either health-wise, relationship-wise, whatever, mm-hmm. Since you coach many people and you have also those remarkable devices,
yes.
How would you say what change actually is, and why does normally always come so much resistance with change once you embark on this journey of changing?
Well, I think that's what is change? That's a very subjective kind of thing, right? Change is when something goes from one state to another state. That's going to be the most basic. When we desire to change as humans, when we say, oh, I really want to, quit smoking. I really want to change a behavior. We have all kinds of things going on inside our body, energetically and neurochemically, that are in favor of that habit to continue. There's a lot of support for a particular behavior to just stay just the way it is. And if we think about, I've been a psychotherapist for a long time. And one of the first things I remember learning was that people our family system is like a mobile. And if one person makes a change in the family system, let's say one person is a heroin addict, and everyone's been sort of maneuvering around that person, and maybe very unhappily, but that system has its way of being. And if that person gets clean and sober, it's like taking and pulling down, and the whole rest of the mobile goes a kilter. And everyone else in the mobile, even though this change is a positive one, will do weird, subtle things to get things back into the equilibrium. Mm-hmm. And so the whole family system needs to be addressed, because the change is so difficult, right? Like our human system wants or has some innate desire to come back to a level of equilibrium, to homeostasis, even if homeostasis isn't so good. And so I think that's predominantly the reason why it's a bit difficult to make changes is because of these sort of forces. And if you think about neurochemically, I'd say that neurochemically, addiction provides adrenaline, norepinephrine, dopamine, all kinds of Oxycontin. No, not Oxycontin and not oxycodone. Oxytocin. It's one of those oxys. Anyway, our body is used to a particular set of chemicals, and that's what cravings are, whether it be for a TV program or for, to go gambling or whatever it is. But sometimes the change we want seems quite simple, right? It seems like I just don't want to do a certain behavior, even if it's not very detrimental, right?
Yeah.
One of the things, I did a test on myself once, and I had moved out of a house I'd lived in for, 15 years, and everything was in its place, right? And so when I moved back in, unexpectedly, I thought when I moved out, I was leaving the house for good. When I moved back in, I decided I will put everything in a different place. Mm-hmm. So I put my silverware in a drawer just next to the drawer that it had been in. And I wanted to just see how long would it take me, right? Because it didn't matter. I had no any emotional charge that I was aware of on where these silverware, where it was. But I also said to myself, I will not allow myself, if I go for the wrong drawer, I will not allow myself to open it. I will catch myself and only go back. And it surprised me, but it took 1 year before I stopped going to the wrong drawer. 1 year.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's a very long time. And it's a little distressing to me that a behavior so simple that I wanted to just, play with. Now, what's really interesting to me is it's been about 6 or 7 years that I've been back in this same house. And if I'm stressed out, I will go to the wrong drawer. Even after many, many months of not going to the wrong drawer, I've created a neural pathway. I know the drawer I want. I go for the drawer I want 99.9% of the time. But I'm telling you, if I'm too tired or if I'm, something strange has happened, I go to the old. So the old neural pathway seems to have a bit of a ghost, it's still hanging in there a little bit. So I think that can sometimes catch you up, right? If you are trying to quit smoking and you're really working toward quitting smoking and you've done it. I've quit smoking. Okay, I'm in the green. I feel better. I'm not gaining weight. I'm not jonesing. But then some stressor happens and all of a sudden I want a cigarette. Like, that might just be how it works. So to have lots of skills and lots of tools so that you can, find your way to not have that one cigarette or to hit that silly, that drawer, right? I still won't allow myself. I'll go open it and I'll be like, oh no, that's not the drawer you want. Nothing you want is in that drawer. So, my kids are still mad at me when they come to my house and they go and they're like, why isn't this silverware where it belongs? So they haven't practiced the change that I did. They're totally still wired to the old drawers. So I think change is difficult. And so, not to just go on and on, but I think the more, like in my bio, you talk about some of the things I do, and EFT, yes. I teach people, I use EMDR, which is an eye movement technique. There are lots of ways of sort of like the way the GDV camera is just one of the ways to see what's going on with the body, right? We can use iridology, we can go to doctors, we can get blood tests, there are many, many ways to know what's really happening. And no one way is like super better than the other. It's just, these are all different ways. I feel the same way about change. Like you want to have a lot of different tools in your toolbox so that, you can adapt to different situations and, have lots of resources so that you can be successful when you're trying to make a change.
Yeah, and you're so beautiful actually led to my next question. You almost answered it already because I wanted to ask you, so if people desire change in their lives and they ask you if you can support them, I know you have a whole rainbow of things you can support them with besides GDV, and you mentioned EFT. And can you maybe explain a little more what the variety of things is you work with, and how they maybe tie into each other and complement each other?
By all means. Well, I'll just give you a little list. I mean, I think EFT is probably one of the tools that I happen to teach people Reiki as well. And I think of Reiki as like I'll teach level 1 and level 2 to everyone for free. Like whatever, if you need, everyone should have access to a flow of energy. You know, in my own life, I've been attuned to several levels of Reiki, up to 3, and I then use my own intellect and figure out how I want to use that energy that comes through. I don't necessarily always call it Reiki anymore because I'm not using it in this very specific way that it was originally intended. But I believe that the hollow reed, the whole idea of energy coming in and being utilized, is available to everyone. And Reiki is just one of the ways to sort of turn the switch on. So Reiki's a foundational thing. If people are interested in that, I teach them, I will attune them. And then EFT is another thing. It's this tapping technique. It was originated by a fellow named Gary Craig. And there are lots of people teaching tapping and different ways to tap. Their Tapping Solution, and Dawson Church is a fantastic energy medicine person. Tapping, what you're doing is you're tapping on very specific meridians, the Chinese meridians, and that sort of process clears the meridians and really can change how you're feeling emotionally. It can have effect on physical symptoms as well. It's quite amazing. And so if you're in a bind and you're stressed out, and you can tap and you can make yourself feel better, you know, this is a tool I think everyone should just have. They should just know how to do it so that they can use it when they need it. But certainly if they're embarking on change, then there's another whole way to use this technique in a very sort of a more systematic sort of, you know, rather than doing it here or there when you're feeling a certain feeling, doing it in a more systematic way to create a change of behavior. Yeah. But I also do, I mean, if you want me to talk more about tapping, I will, but I also do past life regressions. Sometimes things are stuck in a way that doesn't make any sense. Like if we use my example of the kitchen drawers, if I couldn't have stopped, right? Like if it was just like, what the heck is up? Why can't I stop going to the wrong drawer? I would do a past life regression, and I would just ask my system to please show me the life in which silverware drawers were an issue. And as silly as that sounds, my system will show me, you know, what life that was an issue for. And who knows, maybe a silverware drawer fell on my head and now I have an aversion. And if we bring something to consciousness, it often dissipates just the consciousness. Just having a conscious awareness of it can often be more than enough to help make a change. So that's one of the strategies in my toolbox that I will help other people. And I'm happy to teach people how to do these things on their own. They don't have to just keep coming and doing it with me, but these are tools that I want to say, here, have a blast. Go do it and see, you know, what you can do with it. And then, you know, I think I use spiritual mentoring as sort of the baseline. Like, you know, let's talk, let's see what we're doing. Let's keep checking in for a little while to make sure that success is happening, and to talk about what might be getting in the way. And, you know, because I have a therapeutic background, I feel like I can help people dig in the dirt into the past a little bit. But the past really doesn't hold too many of the answers, in my opinion. The past really if we go over it too much, we reinforce the past, and we reinforce neural pathways that are not necessarily helpful to our healing. So it's just to touch in and to help unlock. It's sort of like doing a past life regression, right? Just seeing it and then leaving it. That we don't have to like process it and find out why our grandmother murdered us, right? We just have to know it and then move on. And then the GDV camera is always a part of what I do when I'm working locally. Certainly I'm working with an awful lot of people through Zoom or Skype at great distances. But if people are local and I can have their hands, I'll take their pictures of their fingers, and then we can see whether they're really making a difference. And we take pictures maybe once a month, and we can see what kind of changes are happening, whether we're working in the right direction or not. One of the things that the GDV camera does that I didn't speak about is that it measures the subconscious, and it shows what's going on in the subconscious. And so that's the place I'm really looking when I'm working with people, is what's going on in their subconscious. And it doesn't say, oh yes, there's a past life that needs some attention, but it says, oh, the spleen is weak. And then I use my intellect to say, oh, the spleen in Chinese medicine is about self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So this person on a subconscious level isn't being kind to themselves. All right, well then what are we going to do about that? Or if their heart is very depleted, oh, maybe they've had a heartbreak somewhere in their life or a past life. Let's see if we can provide an intervention that will help that heart stop being so low in energy on an emotional level in the subconscious, and we can see if that changes. It's very concrete scientific data. Like, oh, it was depleted, now it's not. All right, we're on the right track. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And so if somebody who is watching right now would really like to come and meet you in person and to work with you, where in the world would they have to travel to?
Well, I have an office in my home, and I have an office my home is in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is about a 2-hour train ride north of Manhattan. I also have an office in New Paltz, which is a 2-hour bus ride up from Manhattan. New Paltz is a wonderful little, lots of people come and vacation in New Paltz. And if anyone is a rock climber or a bike rider, skier, like, New Paltz is the town. It's a little college town. It's quite lovely in upstate New York. So those are 2 places. And I also, if anyone wanted to meet me to do GDV work, I travel. I'll go just about anywhere. If anyone has a small group of people that want to have their images taken, then I travel quite frequently, actually. Probably about once a month I'm going somewhere, and I'd love to do that more. Yeah. So anybody having events, I've been working with a few different people with going to events and measuring energy in the room and taking pictures of people. So there's that. And then, of course, you can meet me on Skype or Zoom.
So there are very various and many possibilities to meet you and to work with you in person. And so for everybody who is interested, there are all the important links to Melissa's website and whatever you have to know below this interview. So don't be worried. And I think we are at a very beautiful place right now, because you've shared so much inspiring, interesting, scientific, uplifting information with you that before I close, I just would like to ask you, did we leave out anything? Is there anything that you would like to add to our conversation?
Well, you can tell so far that if you ask me a question, I'll talk forever. But I cannot think of anything that we've forgotten.
So thank you from my heart for our conversation.
My pleasure, really, my honor.
Nina. It was so beautiful. Thank you.
My pleasure. You're very, very welcome. And thank you for having me.
And yeah, thank you, Melissa. And thank you, everybody, for listening in today. And before I say goodbye, always remember that you are the one to take the driver's seat of your car called your life. So don't forget about this. Bye.